Bonjour. Vous êtes en communication avec le standard de la présidence de la République française. Un opérateur va vous répondre. Dans le cadre de la lutte contre les incivilités, nous vous informons que cette conversation est susceptible d'être enregistrée. Si vous souhaitez plus d'informations concernant ce traitement, vous pouvez consulter la page internet elysée.fr, rubrique Données personnelles.
Présidence de la République, bonjour.
How you doing? Do you have anybody that can translate in English for me?
Qui ça?
Because
Service de presse?
What was it again?
Le service de presse?
No, I live in the United States and I need a translator because I want to communicate a message to President Macron.
Hold on, please. Présidence de la République, nous vous prions de bien vouloir patienter.
Yes, hello?
Hi.
French presidency?
Yes, I would like to leave a message for President Macron.
Yes.
I live in the United States, and I'm negotiating directly with the President Biden administration and the United Nations Secretary General to initiate the Paris Accords to get nations to accord to their agreements. And so I'm developing powertrains for electric cars that are self-sufficient. These electric vehicles.
I'm sorry to ask you, but who are you and what is your name? Who are you speaking
Sure.
with?
My name is Romero Latorre Jr. If you want, I can spell it for you.
It's Romero Latorre Jr., that's right?
Yes. And,
Okay.
and so I'm negotiating with the Prime Minister of Britain, the Chancellor of Germany, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and President Biden. And so my goal is to make Europe energy independent. And so I will be emailing President Macron the technology. It's going to get registered in the International Patent Treaty Organization and in the USPTO, United States Patent Office in America. But
Actually, I can't take your message like that. You need to write to the Élysée Palace with your suggestions because on the phone we can't take any information.
Where would I address the letter to?
To the palace, Élysée Palace. You can find the address on the internet.
All right. And also let the president know that I deal with nuclear defense technology and negotiating with Antonio Guterres to give the world a nuclear umbrella against nuclear weapons. So I'm a high-stake character in America. And
yes, you can put that on your mail.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
You too. So this is one of the few first communications that I have with the President Macron administration as far as introducing technology that will make the Paris Accords meet their agreements when it comes to carbon emissions, eliminating carbon emissions from the atmospheres of our planet. Also want to make Europe energy independent, and not only Europe but all the world energy and sovereignly independent with green and renewable energies. So I believe that my technology is a disruptor technology. It will dramatically transform the world transportation grids as far as the vehicles throughout the world. My technology will phase out gasoline, combustion engines. It will go a long way to expediting and meeting and all nations getting to meet the Paris Accord agreements. I am also introducing to the world directly through United Nations Assembly and for Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, to oversee a capability that I'm bringing to the world stage when it comes to offering the world a nuclear umbrella. So to shield all nations from nuclear weapons, to offer the world a shield against nuclear destruction, to offer the world a protection umbrella that will safeguard all nations from nuclear attacks, nuclear obliteration. In other words, to shield the world from harm's way when it comes to nuclear destruction. So I'm developing capabilities that will further that initiative along and ushering a nuclear umbrella for the whole world to safeguard the world and every nation in it from nuclear destruction. So these are the first communiques that I'm doing with leaders of heads of states of the European Union member states. And I will be keeping President Biden abreast to the developments in my technologies and the furtherment of implementing nuclear umbrella for the world with Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, overseeing the National Assembly to accord and first force the permanent security members to abide by accepting the initiatives that the world should have an umbrella from nuclear destruction. In other words, the Assembly will vote 100% on the initiatives that the world demands protection from nuclear destruction, and the permanent members have to abide by the Assembly unanimous vote to offer the world a nuclear umbrella unanimously. So with these negotiations, I will be working directly with the member states of all nations within the United Nations Assembly. And once the technology is perfected, the United Nations Assembly will vote, and once they vote 100% to accord, then the permanent members have to obey by the will of the United Nations Assembly. And the United Secretary General will preside over these negotiations. But even him, as a Secretary General, won't have the veto power to interfere with the unanimous vote of the Assembly of all nations within the United Nations. So all nations within the United Nations have to vote unanimously for this nuclear umbrella. And then it's up to the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to persuade over these negotiations, but he doesn't have the ability to interject or to veto anything in according to this umbrella, in accords to this umbrella. It has the domain of this umbrella will be the sole prerogative of all member states of the United Nations. So within the United Nations Assembly, all nations have to vote unanimously 100% for anything to be accorded or enforced when it comes to policies of this particular nuclear umbrella. And the permanent members have to obey. They can't question the unanimous vote of the Assembly. They can't contradict it. They can't veto it. In other words, they can never undermine this nuclear umbrella for the world. If they try to interfere with the unanimous vote of all nations of the United Nations National Assembly, if they try to interfere and veto any 100% vote of the United Nations Assembly, then as permanent members, they will be kicked out as permanent members of the Security
member state of the United Nations as far as security permanent members. In other words, Britain, France, China, and America are the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. They have no say-so in it as far as undermining the accords and the will of all nations on earth. So the wills and the accords of all nations on earth, when they vote unanimously to uphold, to maintain, and to guard and evolve this umbrella, that is their prerogative. That is their unanimous prerogative. And so no member state in the Permanent Security Council can interfere with the unanimous vote of the Assembly. Not even the Secretary General. The sole prerogative and the constitutional right belongs to the United Nations National Assembly member states. In other words, all nations in the world have the right to vote, 100% unanimous votes, and once they vote on any initiatives 100% unanimously, that's what will be accorded, and that's what will be upheld as international law in regards to this nuclear umbrella. And as far as the world being energy independent, yes, I'm working towards that initiative too, to make the world transportation grids energy independent and self-sovereignly renewable. So all nations will have unlimited access to clean renewable energies. My goal is to make the European Union liberated and free and energy independent. They don't have to be held captive to the suppliers of fossil fuels. So, but as far as negotiating with the United Nations, as far as this nuclear umbrella, it has to be the only authority will be that all nations on earth will vote on any initiatives or any amendments to uphold and maintain this nuclear umbrella. So in other words, all nations on earth have to vote 100% on anything and everything that has to do with this nuclear umbrella. And the United Nations Secretary General has to adhere to it and oversee the will of the Assembly. In other words, he has to obey the will of the Assembly. And as far as permanent security members, America, Britain, France, and China, and Russia, they will have to abide by the will of the nations on earth. All are unanimous nations on earth. So they will have no room to argue against it. In other words, what the United International Accords of all nations vote, that's the law of international accords. And a few nations, like these nuclear power armed nations in the United Nations, cannot contradict it, could not veto it, could not interfere with it. As permanent members, they jeopardize being kicked off as permanent members if they try to go against the international unanimous votes. So they have no room to veto the United Nations of all nations on earth. Once all nations on earth vote in accords, 100% unanimous votes, that's what the permanent members have to obey and abide. And they cannot have any room to undermine it or veto it. As permanent members, they only observe, as observers, permanent members, what the will of the nations of all nations on earth accord to. And they have to acquiesce to the will of all nations. And that's how this nuclear umbrella, without discrimination, will defend all nations on earth from nuclear destruction.